Welcome to another video in this Creative Coding for Beginners course. Today I'm really excited because we're going to be introducing a topic called randomness, and it helps us make really interesting works of art. But today we're just going to take our first steps with randomness, so it won't get very complicated. We'll stay sort of simple and easy, but it's the start of a really interesting journey. So, to get started, we're going to draw some circles, and we've been doing that quite a lot over the last few videos, so they should be fairly familiar. I've logged into Open Processing and I've set up the simple setup, and I've made sure that the simple library's been enabled over there so that we're ready to go. And what I've done while you're away is type the instructions for 4 circles. Now let's look at them a little bit more closely. We can see that the coordinates for all of the circles are 400, 300, 400, 300. Now in our last couple of videos we explored what coordinates mean and how they work. So we know that on our canvas 400, 300 is there, right in the middle of the canvas. That means those circles should be centered in the middle of the canvas. And we also remember that the last number that's passed to the circle instruction is the size. So here we're drawing a circle of size 400, this one is of size 300, this one is of size 200 and 100. So we should see large circle, medium circle, smaller circle, even smaller circle. Let's see if that goes. Yep, you can see that 400, 300, 200, 100. So that shouldn't be too much of a surprise because we've worked with circles before, and coordinates and their sizes. So that's if that's a little unfamiliar, have a look at the last 2 or 3 videos and kind of get familiar with that again. Okay, so that's kind of a nice pattern. While we're here, I'm going to introduce another little instruction. Well, we know we've used fill to choose the fill colour for shapes like circles and squares. So if I typed fill red, we know that these circles will go red. But if I said no fill, and if you notice there's a capital F there, that means don't fill the shape with any colour. Leave it transparent so it's completely see-through. So let's have a look at what effect that has. Yep, so we've got the same circles, but this time there's no fill. They are coloured, well, the outlines of those circles are coloured black. The outline is called a stroke, and we can actually choose the colour for the stroke. We can say red. So the instruction there is stroke, and just like fill, we can pass a colour. So that's red, yep, and let's say green. There you go, you can see what happens. Okay, so now to the fun part. That hopefully wasn't too difficult. What if we changed the sizes of those circles? Let's pick a random number, I don't know, 150, 243, 87, pick another number, I don't know, 123. So if we drew that, if we run the code, we'll get circles with different sizes, and sometimes we might have an interesting pattern if we do that, and sometimes it might not. But what if we wanted the computer to choose a random number? So that's an important point and worth repeating. We're not going to choose the number for the size of the circle. We want our computer to choose the size of the circle at random. Pick a number from a range. So we can do that, and that's actually quite powerful, because what it does is it hands more control over what's drawn to the computer. So it's taking that creative control in some sense from us to the computer. And instead of, if we watch what happens to this number 150 there, which is just there, instead of saying, let's choose a random number like 123 or 421 or I don't know, 343, if we say choose a random number by using a new instruction, random number, so this is the new bit. So all we've done is replace the number with this instruction called random number, and that number, that number there is a capital N. Sorry, that letter there is a capital N, so don't forget those. Just like no fill has a capital F, random number has a capital N. It's a convention for how we can create these functions. That would work, except if I said to you, think of a random number, you might say, I could, but it'd be more helpful if you told me in which range you want me to pick a random number. Do you want me to pick a random number from 0 to 10, or from 0 to 100, or 0 to 400? That's much more helpful, and in fact that's what our computers will need. So we need to say the range from which the computer will pick a random number, so we pass that as a number in those brackets. So you've become familiar with the idea that the brackets are used to pass information to the instruction. So there's a few new things there, so let's repeat that. Previously we were using numbers like this to tell the circle instruction how big the circle should be. For this one we're saying, nope, I'm not going to decide on the number. I want you, the computer, to pick a random number in the range 0 to 400. It could be 100. It might pick 102. It might pick 7. It might pick 399. But it won't pick a number bigger than 400. It won't pick 500, for example, or 402, because that's bigger than the range we've given it. So let's try it. Let's see what happens. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste that for all of the 4 circles, so they will all have random sizes. Just putting a space there just to help us see the code more clearly. Let's run it. That's interesting. That didn't look like it had chosen random numbers. They do look a little bit even, don't they? But watch this. If I run the code again using this rerun button, it's different. It looks like there's 2 very close together. That one's medium size and that's small. Let's run it again. It's different again. Different again. And again. And again. And we can keep going. That's a nice pattern. So what's happened is that see, they're all quite small there. What's happened is that they're all very small. And that's not me being deliberate about it. This is pure random chance. What's happened is that the random number instruction has picked a number between 0 and 400, and that's been used as a size for the first circle. The second circle has a random number which will be different in all likelihood from this one, the chances of them being the same are very, very minimal. So that's why we have 4 circles being drawn with different sizes, and more importantly, when we run it, it's different every time we run it. Isn't that amazing? So we've said, let's think about what we've done. We've handed over control to the computer to pick the size of the circle, and it can surprise us with the results that it gives us. We saw some really interesting small shapes and big shapes. There you go, that's quite an interesting shape. That is rather interesting, isn't it? Okay, so we've drawn some lovely circles of random size. We're going to look at one more thing, which is a really useful thing to be able to do with random numbers, and that's to be able to constrain the range that the random numbers are picked from. So far we've said the random numbers are picked from 0 to 400, but we can actually specify, we can say what the lower limit should be, not just the upper limit. So if I say pick a random number from 200 to 400, this is how we do it. We provide 2 numbers, the lower end and the upper end. 200, 400. What this means is that the sizes of the circles will never be less than 200. They'll never be more than 400, they'll be somewhere in that range. Let's try running that to see the effect. Yep, so you notice that there's never a small circle in there now. It's interesting, isn't it? So there's always an area in the middle that's excluded. They're never allowed to be smaller than size 200. So that can produce some interesting effects. Let's try making the last 2 circles. Let's make sure that they are from a small range. So pick from 0 to 100. So we always have something in the middle. So these 2 are going to always be fairly medium largish, and these 2 are always going to be fairly small, because these will have sizes picked from 0 to 100, and these will have sizes picked from 200 to 400. So let's try that. Yep. So there's always a small set of circles in the middle, and there's always a larger set outside. So that's interesting, isn't it? We can use this random number instruction to force the picking of random numbers to be within a range, and that's really quite nice. That's kind of interesting. We'll leave that there today. We won't tire our brains out too much. The whole kind of area of using randomness is quite huge, and there's lots of ways in which we can use randomness. Today we've just dipped our toes into it, and in a familiar kind of exercise of drawing circles, we've seen how randomness can be used to pick the size of the circle, and we've also seen how we can limit the range of numbers that are used to pick a random number and use the size. So I think that's quite exciting, and I'm really excited that we've now moved on to some really interesting topics. We will explore randomness again in future to do much more interesting things, and I can't wait actually. But today that's all we're going to do, just to get ourselves kind of familiar before we kind of do more interesting things. So I hope you enjoy that, and I really encourage you to have a go yourself. If you want to kind of try something a little bit extra, you might want to replace the coordinates with a random number. Have a go, see what happens. Okay, see you next time. Bye.